Hi everybody, Nick here, and I got a review for you today of the Spyderco Mantra 1. This is hot off the presses. I literally just got this knife yesterday and it just released to the world a few days before that. I'd pre-ordered it because I liked it and I figured I'd put a few words up on YouTube about it. So I'm going to talk about the size, I'm going to talk about the features, and I'm going to talk about overall impressions of it. Size-wise, the clear comparison is your Spyderco Delica, and here's a Dragonfly for scale. It's not a huge knife, but it's also a little on the bigger side compared to your Delica. The blade, at least, is. In terms of the body size and the handle, if you shut the blades on these knives, they are pretty much identical, which is kind of cool, actually. They fit a lot more body into the same size handle on your Mantra. You can see that the only real difference between these two knives in terms of thickness and in terms of dimension is the flipper tab on the Mantra. Yet because they've got the blade going deeper into the handle and more toward the tip relative to your Delica, where the blade stops here, they're able to fit, they being Eric Glesser and I presume Sal was involved too, are able to fit a lot more cutting edge into the same size handle, which is kind of cool, but also a little frustrating if you live in an area where 3 inches is a lot of land, or if you like smaller knives. But anyways, basically if you can carry yourself a Delica, you can carry your Mantra, as long as blade length isn't a factor for you. The other note about carry is that your Mantra is using your deep carry Spyderco wire clip, which is my favorite pocket clip from Spyderco, bar none. And second to your Graham clip, that actually slides into the pocket very differently, it's my favorite clip overall. But this means that on the Delica, your pocket will sit about here, and so you have all this sticking up above your pocket, and on your Mantra, this is the only thing sticking up. So I like that a lot. That's a really good design choice they made here. So that's size. Feature-wise, the big feature of this is that it's a flipper. And it is indeed a flipper. You've got your flipper tab, and it's got a detent and everything. And it's an acceptable flipper. I'd even say good. For instance, it beats the Hinderer XM18 by a long, long shot. But that's not a great flipper. But at the same time, the detent is just a little... Oh, there you go. The detent is just a little weak. So you can't do, for instance, push-button flipping, where you just try and press. That won't work. In fact, what you really need to do is press perpendicular to the tab. So you need to grab it and do one of these motions. So something like that, and you can get it to flip reliably. Or you can always just give it a little wrist, and that'll usually lock everything in. So it's a good flipper, but it's also not spectacular. It's not as good as the Southern was, and it's certainly not as good as something like your Graham Mid-Tech here, or, I mean, the gold standard, the Grimsmo Norseman. Obviously, it's not that good, but this is also a knife that costs a lot less than those. So flipping action is good. It's not as good as, for instance, your ZT 0450. I've sold that knife since, but it's not quite there yet. But it's clear that Spyderco is getting better at flippers, and I hope that with a little bit more work on this guy, making the detent a little stronger, it'll be a better flipper for it. So that's your big feature. Other feature is the blade steel. This is CPM M4. M4 is a really nice steel because it's got incredible wear resistance. That means it's a total pain in the neck to sharpen, but you can get there, and once you get there, it's going to have a great edge that's really sharp for a long time, which is nice. What you pay for that, though, is it's not quite as stainless as a lot of modern steels. Like VG10, you're really hard-pressed to make it stain, to have any kind of rust, but on M4 you kind of have to keep on that. Throw a little frog lube or some other kind of protectant on there. So that's your blade, and the blade shape is good, as always. I mean, I love the Delica, you guys know that, and the blade shape is very similar. This has maybe a little bit more belly, and the tip isn't as strong, because the Delica's got this little downturn, which gives you a really strong tip for cutting. The Mantra is not quite there, but you know, I certainly can't argue with that. And like I said, I think they did make the blade a little too big on this guy, particularly for people living in under 3-inch areas, and also, frankly, because, you know, this is right on that borderline. It's not a big blade, but it's also not a small blade, so the people who like big blades won't be happy, and the people who like small blades won't be happy. But, you know, I'm just armchair quarterbacking there. It has a steel lock bar insert, which is good. That means there's no hint of lock stick. And that insert also, I don't know if you can see here, but it also serves as a lock bar stabilizer, which means you can't push the lock bar too far past where it needs to go, which is, I've never felt that necessary, but it's always nice to see. It's another failure mode, and especially when the lock bar is this thin. Lockup is secure. No real concerns there. And seems to be, about as solid as you want on a blade that this thin. It's not a blade you're going to be batoning through a car door. But again, if you're batoning blades through the car door, you got other issues going on. Like I said, the wire clip is great. And has a lanyard tube, which actually caught me off guard. As you can see here, there's a lanyard hole, but there's a solid metal tube through there, which, I don't quite know why they've done it that way, but by God they have. And, it's kind of like the Southern, Spyderco Southern had a similar affair. And I bet you can take that out if it's offensive to you. The construction on the back here is just open with standoffs, but I bet somebody could make a gem of a backspacer for you if that was your scene. Handles are nice and dark. That means they're going to take some snail trails. Out of the box, this guy had some on there. But you know what? That's okay. Wabi-sabi and whatnot. And like I said, can't argue with that. The stop pin is internal, by the way, in case that is meaningful to you. It's not to me, but, hey, why not? It's cool. So, overall impressions. The $169 question is, should I buy one and am I keeping it? Should you buy one? Well, it depends what you're looking for. It's got the Spyderco ergonomics. It's not quite as nice as your Delica, mostly because of this flipper tab. Kind of presses against your finger, giving you a bit of a hot spot here. But the ergos are good. I really can't complain about that. So, that's nice. But is this $169 knife? That puts it in some contested territory. That puts it in the same area as your ZTO 450, which is a better flipper by absolute far. It puts you in the same area as your Benchmade 940, which is the very best thing that Benchmade makes, at least in my humble opinion. And it puts you, this is towards the top end of the best knife any human could want without being insane, like me. And, it's a really good option. If you like a blade this size, if you like a really capable slicer, this would be a good blade for food prep. Although if you're a chef, you're bringing your own. And it's got all the features you would want out of a knife at that level. The only thing that really makes me hesitate is, like I said, I'm not a big fan of the blade length. I think they could have made it a little shorter or a little longer. And the flipping action is just not quite where it needs to be. The flipping action is maybe 80, maybe 90% of what I want to see. The tent could be a little harder, and that would make it just a slam dunk. But the fact is that over probably 200 times of flipping it in the last few days, there you go, about, 90% of the time it deployed like I want it. If that's a problem for you, if you really need that flipping reliability, or if that brings you joy, then you might look elsewhere. But if you're willing to put a little wrist into things, that's a wonderful, that's not really a problem. Am I keeping it personally? I'll be honest with you, probably not, no. I like very much the knife. It's pretty, and it scratches in many ways the same itch that the Delica does. But I don't know that it's bringing $100 to the table on top of your Delica. If I want a flipper, I've got flippers that I really, really love. Your Grahams and your Grimsmo. I got flippers all day long. So, with the blade shape being what it is, with the ergonomics being slightly worse than the Delica, and with the flipping action being not quite where I want to see it, I don't see this one sticking around in my long-term collection at all. It's a very nice companion to the Delica, and it may be a very good only knife, but, for a collector, maybe not so much. Who knows? But anyways, that's your Spyderco Mantra. It is a gem. The action is the only thing that makes me a little reluctant to say that. It's about 90% of what you'd want, and at $170, that's a little hard to swallow. But if you like every other part of it, by God, go for it. Because otherwise, it's a Spyderco Tai-Chung knife. Hit and finish is great. It's on bearings. You can't really go too wrong with it. But whether you're going $100 more right, Who knows? That's a question only you can answer. So, Spyderco Mantra 1, I hope this has been helpful. Thanks, everybody, and if you love it, leave me a comment. And if you don't love it, leave me a comment. But most of all, have yourself a nice day. Bye now.